Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. I shall see what's going on a lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual. Excuse me. So we're back to pre-recorded episodes. Did I absolutely forget that? I haven't done a pre-recorded episode today. Yes. And that's why I'm recording very, very late. But yes, I didn't get back too late. I got back a few hours ago, to be honest. I was mainly catching up on things. I've not finished catching up on everything. But good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 11:57 PM on Sunday, June 22nd, 2025. So there's a lot of things. You might be like, where have I been? I went to Scotland over the weekend, mainly because a friend was essentially having a stag do. You might be like, why in traditional gender roles are you invited to a stag do? And I suppose my answer would be like, we're sticking it to the tradition, ways of tradition, I suppose. Really, it was kind of just more of a party, if anything. Although I think there is a traditional stag do which happened today, which, fair enough, I wasn't invited to. So I'm back. There's not really much I'm going to talk about to it. You might be like, oh, do you have crazy stories? I mean, there certainly were some stories, but I think a lot of them sort of veer into much more personal than what I would usually say for Animal Crossing sort of anecdotes. So, it was a fun time. That's all right. There was a lot of drinking. It was basically a nice dinner one night and the next night a pub crawl. So, yes, that's that. I'm back now. It was only for a weekend. I'm catching up on a lot of stuff now. The next thing I'm going to catch up on is a Honkai Star Rail for preview for the next patch. I kind of already know what's gonna be in it, but I haven't seen what's it called, the preview episode thing. I've seen the art fight, what the new theme is. It's crystals versus fossils. If you haven't seen it, it's a very interesting one. I think it was one I did put quite highly. I didn't mean to do that. I'm not sure it's the one I put the highest I could have. I guess we need to go grab a fruit now to let grow. I think the one I put highest might have been City Lights and Forest Nights or something, because I was like, I kind of like that vibe. But I was like, I'm not mad with crystals or fossils. I also think it was quite a nice sort of open-ended one. I can't remember what other options there were, to be honest, or which ones I liked off the top of my head. I probably spoke about it with my friend. So, let's see. City Lights. Let's see. I said, I like City Lights versus Forest Nights the most. Time and Space I would put up there, but it's a big overlap with Stardust. Oh, yes. Because the last year's theme was Seafoam and Stardust. And Space has a very big overlap with that, so... Heart and Soul I put up there. Oh yeah, I like Heart and Soul, because I think that's quite an interesting, open to interpretation one. And I put Fossils as a Crystals as an interesting one. I think it's one but it's a lot more physical, which tends to end up being pretty good for the art fight themes, because it's a lot easier to sort of conceptualize something more physical rather than something a bit more abstract. Because really at the end of the day it's just for it's almost like a mascot really, the theming of the teams, isn't it? Anyway, Fossils as Crystals are chosen. I've watched episode 5 now of The Amazing Digital Circus. I liked it, I think. I'm not... As I said to my friend, I don't think it's my favourite episode, but I think it's subject to change depending on what the rest of the story plays out like. Because to me, I'm like, this episode feels much more like a setup for a lot of different things. It feels like it's sort of pushing the direction of, oh yes, you can see Ragatha's development coming. You can kind of see what's, you might not know exactly, but you can kind of see what's likely to happen. You can see Jax's sort of development. You can see a little bit more of a lore of what's going on. I won't talk in depth about it. Go watch it if you haven't, I suppose, and you're worried about spoilers. I suppose I can talk about it sort of tangentially. I'm deciding what topic to really talk about today, to be honest. There's a few options, mind you. I'm sort of just trying to think. I mean, okay, well, I'm already on this topic, right, so I guess we'll talk about this. I'm going to give a preliminary spoiler warning for Amazing Digital Circus Episode 5 from here on out. I'm not going to intentionally talk anything about it, but it's something which, like, I've conceptually thought about, like, a lot. And it's to do with ensemble cast, which tends to be one of my more preferred protagonist style things. It's not like I'm not a fan of a singular person and following that through, but I tend to like a sort of cast of characters with different personalities, and the reason is sort of twofold. I think I tend to enjoy media properties which show like a team of people coming together despite differences and doing XYZ, who knows what. But I also think, to me, a lot of media properties have a central core tenet or theme that they're trying to explore or talk about or discuss or something. And to me, having multiple perspectives and views on that sort of thing helps really flesh out the themes even stronger. You know, people who agree with it, people who disagree with it, people who accept it, people who reject it. That sort of conceptual thing. And I think that what comes as a natural consequence of that is like that kind of, it doesn't require an ensemble cast, but I think an ensemble cast is a really good way to go about it, because the ensemble cast can allow a lot of character development between the things. It allows a lot more of a recurring discussion, and it doesn't necessarily have to portray one in a good or bad light. Some things certainly should be portrayed in a good or bad light, of course, but some things which are a bit more abstract, I think, don't necessarily have to. You know, like, let's talk about, I don't know, what's a very common thing, like loss or something, you know, about accepting loss or rejecting loss, I suppose, in a way. There's different healthy ways to go about it and different unhealthy ways to go about it. And by having an ensemble cast, you can sort of cast a light on all these different ways. But I think one thing that ends up necessitating, why it necessitates an ensemble cast rather than a main character and side characters, is the fact that if you are going to have all these fleshed out viewpoints, you kind of need all the characters to be fleshed out and developed in their own right. Otherwise it feels hollow, right? If your goal is to ultimately have a sort of, not necessarily nuanced or balanced take on every single angle for something, but to give a possibility of allowing yourself to look at things from multiple angles in any sort of timely way, you kind of necessitate having the characters be fleshed out in one degree or another, right? Like, you need at least a baseline character to establish a character's motivations or understandings or perspectives on some things. Anyway, the reason I talk about this is mainly the fact that it's something I think about a lot, and I think it's why a lot of the worlds and stories I like to imagine in my head tend to be ensemble cast focused. There's not one main character going through a story. That's not as common. It's often, sorry, I'm also tying up my hair at the same time because it's pretty hot right now. It's often multiple characters facing something, but they have different personalities. That way they can sort of bounce off each other and then also share different perspectives on the same thing. But one thing which I think Amazing Digital Circus did actually pretty well in this episode is, I must have spoken about this before, but the concept of like multi-character development, right? Because I feel like a lot of these sort of, I shouldn't say a lot, it's not like I've watched a ton of or ingested a ton of media, but it's not uncommon for media properties to be like, oh, you know, let's develop the ensemble cast. What will happen is each character will get like a focus episode which is basically only about them, and then maybe also interacts with the pseudo main character of a show. Of course, you know, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, I think, is one of the biggest epitomes of this, right? There's not many episodes which are like, it always tends to be like, this is one character's focus episode and it's interacting with Twilight Sparkle. It's only later on that it's like, oh, some of them get like duo episodes, kind of. But I'm not saying that's like My Little Pony's like the pinnacle of writing or anything like that. I'm trying to think of another good one. It's a bit hard to think of. Like, I don't know why Bug Snacks came to mind. I mean, that's very much an ensemble cast, even though you play as the main character and Phil is kind of the main character, quote, quote. But it's like all the stories you go on focus entirely on them, and then it's only kind of like wrapped up together with a overarching story. But to me, I feel like I love the concept of characters being able to engage with each other and develop each other through their own sort of things that they say, you know? the development of one character can simultaneously develop another character, I think. And I think that's a very difficult thing, or I must imagine, I say with no experience in writing whatsoever, to get right to balance. Like, it must be a really difficult thing to be able to write so cleverly about one character saying one thing, both sheds a light on their character and someone else. Like, obviously it's very easy to make it shed a light on their character, but how do you make it shed a light on someone else? But I think Digital Circus actually did a very good job with this one. Namely, it did a very good job at shedding light on both Jax and Raghaver together and their dynamic, kind of through the medium of Pomni, kind of. I would say Pomni kind of gets put into the sort of, not a mediator role, but more of like a tool for demonstrating the growth or perspective. But I think the line that makes it mostly iconic is, so this is big spoilers for episode 5 of Amazing Digital Circus, is during the stargazing scene where Raghaver says, "Not anymore," which is both a very telling line from Raghaver, being like, that's a, I mean, I'm not going to delve into huge spoilers and theories when we don't know the exact story, but it's a very telling line in that it's a very, very cutting remark, which we don't know the exact story, but it's the impression I give is like that would definitely be something which would be considered like over the line or something. It's very much like a, well, you didn't need to go that far sort of thing, which is, you know, crazy, because I mean, so far Raghaver's very much been shown as a people pleaser, right? And you get little hints in previous episodes of her sort of not necessarily her having much more, I'm not sure sinister thoughts is the right idea, but having much more maybe intrusive, maybe much more less pleasant thoughts about some of her friends, which she doesn't necessarily come to light, probably, you know, bottles up, and it's sort of built in via resentment over time. And her having said this means that that's something that she's definitely capable of thinking about and possibly wanting to say, which is pretty crazy. And Jax understandably has a very, very sort of visible reaction to this, and it does a very good job at developing Jack's character as well, as being like, oh yeah, he did have someone that he actually cared about, to a certain degree to get that visceral, that bigger reaction from a character who's basically demonstrated to be a jerk this entire time. Just one simple line, you see, it gives like parallel growth to both characters at the same time. That's what I think is interesting. Now, a lot of times you might also say like this is just kind of how growth works, because a lot of the times it's not like the character interacts with the universe necessarily. A lot of the time these ensemble casts they interact with each other. That's true, but I feel like a lot of the time these ensemble casts interact with each other, it gets into the sort of way of like this conversation is meant to grow this one character and the other character is just kind of like listening and having, you know, mild growth. I think it's very difficult to get that very perfect balance of like, can you simultaneously push them both forward with this, like if you imagine it's sort of like a bar chart where each character has a character arc or something from 0 to 100, can you like find a way to do a conversation which proportionally pushes up two characters the same amount at the same time, rather than pushing one up a lot and then the other gets like, you know, a tiny percent. So I do have appreciation for Digital Circus in the sense that like I mean, obviously, I don't want to make or comment too much because, in my opinion, Gooseworks, the creator, she should be making exactly what she wants to make, and it's very clear that she is. But the parts which definitely appeal to me the most are much more character-focused development moments. I still find the humour amusing, I will say, and I'm very glad that she can create it in the way that she wants. But it's like moments like that where I'm just like, you know, that's a good appreciation for something like that. Something which can simultaneously cast a light on two characters at the same time, which, I don't know, I think it's, you kind of need to build the story in a very specific mindset, I think, right? Because you need characters with contrasting sort of ideals in a way to both be commenting on the same thing and then have a shared history. It doesn't work in every single situation or case or scenario, but when it does work, I'm just like, wow, beautiful. I don't know if I can express it properly, I suppose. Because then you might be like, what about episode 3 and like Kinga's development kind of like also sheds a light on Pomni? I'm like, yes, it kind of does, but it doesn't feel the same. I think maybe it's because Pomni takes a much more passive role in it. It's not like it shows Pomni's anything we haven't seen from Pomni, of Pomni just being like generally kind of a nice person, or maybe that's just like an assigned default. I guess it's kind of like a revelation about Ragnar and a revelation about Jax in this one, which makes it most interesting. Is that fair? Probably not, but I mean, it's what it is. Is what I'd say. But yeah, parallel character development, or simultaneous character development. I'm really surprised I haven't spoken about this before. I'm trying to search to see if it's something I have spoken about, but it doesn't look like it. Growth, maybe? No? Okay. Who knows? It really feels like something I spoke about before, but not. Anyway, that would be my sort of like writing ideal, if and when I ever get to writing about something. It's very much more like I want to be able to have an ensemble cast, and I want to be able to have all the characters grow in a simultaneous sense. Like, yeah, one episode might be more focused on one character, but the conversations that they have with each of the characters should simultaneously push out all the characters like the equal amount proportionally. It's just this character's focus episode will have more of that conversations, so they get pushed up a bit more, kind of, you know. It's sort of like, I guess I'm trying to have a best of both worlds, which I'm not sure if it's possible, because at the same time I don't know how difficult it is to write something like that. I'm not a writer. This is just something theoretically. Anyway, there's probably a lot of good examples where there's like simultaneous ensemble growth rather than focused character growth. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a focused character growth on ensemble, because I think it is a good way of being able to write a neat story together. Because I think a problem with the way I'm talking about it is the fact that it would have to stretch a character story arc, or like not even an entire story, but like the mini story arc over multiple episodes, rather than having a much more character-centric episode, which would sort of be able to tell a more complete story in one package, which may be better or may be worse, I don't know. Depends on the pacing. I don't know, I feel like talking about writing concepts are a lot easier than actually executing them, right? Because it means that I can just do all the easy stuff and be like, it would be really nice to do this without even having to run into any pitfalls of like, well, actually you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Anyway, I don't know, just sort of spitballing here. And I'm going to round this episode up here, I think. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, so farewell. Until next time. Bye-bye for now.